We are back streaming for Project Liberal, doing a little Peglin today. So anyone who joined us last week got a rousing discussion with some community members about selectorate theory and all kinds of other stuff against the backdrop of me being horrible at this Peggle-based roguelike known as Peglin. So we were in the middle of a run last time. For some reason, it didn't really save that progress effectively, in that it didn't really save it at all. So if you were hoping to see the continuation of that, you are as disappointed as I am, though I don't think we had the juice to go all the way. We were about halfway through one. So we're gonna start a new game, and we're gonna figure it out as we go. We'll have to figure out which little guy we want to be. I mean, that's just wild. I don't know why that would default to 2 difficulty level. Let's go all the way. And sure, why not? He's my weakest guy. We might as well do some runs. Little scientist dude. So, what do we want to do here? Ooh, upgrading is good. Let's go ahead and upgrade it. So I'll be hanging out for a couple of hours, gaming, maybe chatting with any community members that drop on in. And beyond that, we'll just see if I can continue to grind levels for my little Peggle dudes. I don't really know what the right thing to do is. I don't know if I should be skipping more aggressively. I think I should, because we've got this good slime guy that's going to upgrade our guys that get slimed. So I think we want to be doing some sliming. I think is pretty much what it amounts to. These early levels are pretty easy, so we pretty much just want to farm gold anyways. So I think that's where we are and what we're going to do. I do think in terms of what's been going on in the world, gosh, I mean, we've kind of got, I don't know about anybody else out there, but I've definitely experienced some fatigue with just administration insanity. We've got a White House lawn that looks like it's ready for a WWE match. We've got we're already in midterm election insanity as primaries resolve themselves, and we've got everything going on in Maine with Plattner, and continuing revelations there that was a questionable choice. And yet we still have the Senate in the balance. So I think it's there's been a lot. On Twitch chat, thoughts on the Carmelo Anthony verdict. I don't know enough to have any really detailed and rigorous thoughts. Tell me what you think. What are your thoughts on the Carmelo Anthony verdict? And we can talk about them. But yeah, again, these early levels, I feel like it's just kind of collect gold, grind out. Again, I don't know if the skip was necessary or wise there. I mean, it got me a couple of upgrades, but I don't know if I really need it. Not a master at this point. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know what kind of political summer we're going to have. Sometimes the summer gets pretty quiet. Nothing in this administration has been particularly prone to being quiet. We, of course, have hostilities with Iran flaring up again. If the word again seems odd there, it's only because you live in reality and not the weird political space where every 7 seconds we're supposed to believe that we've negotiated a settlement only to have reality once again rear its head and make everyone realize that we don't have a settlement of any kind that is meaningful. And then hostilities quote-unquote resume, even though they never really do. So it is going to be scary this summer. I know a lot of energy reserves are under a lot of big pressure with the Strait of Hormuz closed and never really reopening. Here we go. Finally closed that out. Ooh, do we want to go hard in upgrade mode with best foot forward? So we want to have unique orbs in the deck. Picking up one of these might not be the worst thing in the world. However, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. We're doing an upgrade thing. We don't really have the refresh right now to support it, but that's what we're going to do. And then we'll see. If it's ugly, it's ugly. Steal some cash. There's also nothing super exciting in the top of this one, so I might want to route eventually left and try to pick up this guy. Or, yeah, I mean, the problem is picking up this guy, you kind of miss all this goodness on the side. So, and then back-to-back shops, we probably don't have the cash to support. Though you end up with back-to-back shops anyway. Gosh, we definitely don't want 3 shops. So I think I'm kind of just working my way down here and then bouncing around.
Yo, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Let's see here. I've got Nolan back in voice chat and Karan verse Singh. Hey guys.
Uh, hey there. I was gonna say something about the Hormuz conflict, which is the hello,
Hello.
Nolan.
Hi.
I am
Hey, thanks for joining on video. I will say, if you join on video, it will pop you on stream. So if you want to be seen on stream, then you're succeeding. And if you don't, you can pop your video off and your face will go away. So no worries.
that's fine.
Ah,
So yeah, you wanted to talk a bit about Hormuz.
From what we can see, like if you look at the historical precedents behind the strait being blocked, the only precedents we really have is the Iran-Iraq war in the 80s.
Mhm.
And if you really look at the conflict, you cannot resolve this right now because back in those times, Iran did have a pretty decent navy that we armed, but we were able to take it out in Operation Praying Mantis.
Mhm.
And for one, seems to be a general sense among the general populace and the community in general. Like when we look at people in the Middle East or people not in the West, that the American military is, getting their ass handed to themselves.
Yeah.
Because I am right now in India, and the media here seems to be quite negative of the American war effort in the sense that they look at it as incompetent, as Iran getting the better out of Trump and the West, which most of Indian media is sold to the Russians. I'm just gonna say it right now, because whenever you in the Ukraine war, the tide turns in favor of Russia. They're always on about the Ukraine war, but when the tide turns against them, they go silent. And India's general, pro-Russian tilt uh, when it comes to the popular
Yeah,
belief
a
that
lot of
India has
nationalist
the right.
politics in India that seem to be in the same stripe as sort of nationalist politics elsewhere in having that pro-Russian
Yeah,
slant. Yeah.
would you say that realism is kind of a common thing in Indian foreign policy? Like they were a part of the non-aligned movement, right? Back in the day.
yeah, yeah. The Indian politics before Modi had generally been that of whoever's gonna do better for us,
Ah,
we're gonna go with them. If France is our benefactor, if they're gonna give us military aid, foreign aid, diplomatic aid, we're gonna go with France. If the Soviet Union's gonna do it, we're gonna go with the Soviet Union. If the UK is gonna do it, we'll go with the UK. So there's a sense that Indian foreign policy is, in general, led by a sense of realpolitik, as one would say. I know I butchered the pronunciation of the word, but that's how they generally, in Indian circles, they pronounce it like that. So, yeah, there is a sense that the foreign policy has been quite realpolitik, but in recent years, we've seen a shift from a more realpolitik foreign policy to a more overt pro-Russian, pro what jokingly people call the fascist international tilt, in the sense that if not the government, then because there's the official policy. The official policy is still real politics, non-alignment. We're not going to go with anyone. But unofficially, it's sort of divided because the more center and left-wing parties in India generally prefer to be with the West. They tend to be more Western aligned, while the right-wing parties tend to be more Russia aligned and tend to be more aligned with, ironically, China. Because, while India and China have had spats, this government is the most pro-Chinese government we've had in years. With trade deals and everything, the foreign ministers going on tours and stuff, huh, it's a doozy. But
Hey, Trump said he was a peacemaker. He did a great job of that.
yeah,
So I know we started by talking about Hormuz and certainly how that's reflected
yeah,
in India through this lens of kind of Russian anti-American propaganda and just sort of like this, the U.S. is just getting its ass handed to it, and look at what a paper tiger the American
yeah,
empire is, and all this that sort of rhetoric that I think.
yep,
I think we recognize that even in the U.S. as coming through this RT Russia Today kind of filter. Um, but there is a very real sense where America was not ready for this conflict. I mean,
yeah,
the dual things of we were not ready for it and we started it, right? Like we
yeah,
started the thing we were not prepared for, which is doubly stupid. But then I think that the Trump administration learned basically no lessons, or maybe even the wrong lessons, from observing the conflict in Ukraine. And we are very much a military geared still towards 20th century style conflict. You're still very much adopting this
Are
philosophy
we?
of like technology is going to drag us forward. This
Oh
very
yeah.
expensive, high technology, high impact
yeah,
solution is going to be the force multiplier that allows America to project conventional military power. And the drone war is just not something that America has been ready for, which is baffling considering that the world has gotten to see what warfare really is now in Ukraine for, going on 5 years. Um,
It,
it is
it's kind of
kind of
baffling
baffling
because
the
we
extent
invented
to which
drone
we have
warfare.
dropped that ball.
But I mean, I don't know because when I think 20th century conflict, generally it would generally the 20th century was defined by industrialization, warfare involving lots of conscription, generally less precise weapons. Over time, I think the United States has shifted more towards like a counterinsurgency focus. Um, our last major large-scale combat operation was the Iraq War in 2003, and ever since then, you know, I mean, we know drone warfare. I mean, we wrote the book on it. There's a really good book called "On Killing Remotely," which kind of talks about like all of the psychology about it. But like, I think the difference is it's less that the United States isn't used to fighting with drones. The difference is back in the day, drones used to be only a privilege for the rich
Mm-hmm.
countries. We can run around with drones, with predator drones all day, um, and kick the shit out of like people in Afghanistan who didn't stand a chance. So the difference is now anybody, just basically anybody can get that capability with a trip to Walmart and little know how to make homemade explosives. You know, uh,
yeah,
I mean, night vision is the same way. Like we have to. Yeah. Oh, my bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I think when I think of drone warfare in the modern context, I mean what we're seeing in Ukraine. I mean, $1,000 buys you a capability. I'm not talking about the early 21st century, Predator drone strikes in Iraq and Afghanistan against a force that can't match or answer that capability. I think right now the problem is no one can really answer the drone capability, but it's very easy to match the drone capability. So you have these large areas of drone cover that both sides can create and that both sides then have to operate under because supremacy is not attainable. And so, I think you look at a conflict, just speaking as an American that has been engaged with American policy and politics and foreign policy, especially, the way in our politics we've tended to talk about foreign policy bakes in this assumption that we're this unchallengeable force on the global scale, that we just have this supremacy that will either come automatically or be very easily obtained, and then we'll just operate within a theater, right? So we can talk about like the ethical ramifications of that operation, or the global impact, or the diplomatic response to starting some kind of conflict, but it really isn't something Americans are used to talking about, the idea of whether we can win the war, right? will we prevail is not generally a part of the calculation in a way that I think with what warfare is now, it absolutely has to be a question of whether a conflict is even winnable. Like, I don't know. I suppose someone would have to articulate to me objectives in order for me to make this a declarative statement, but I don't know that we can win a war with Iran as things are now.
So when it comes to the war with Iran, generally, when we look at military theory and how it has evolved within the last century, there is a really good read by Colonel Charles S. Olivero. I think he wrote in either Praxis Tacticum or Strategia that the current tilt among the general US military being focused on less on actual military practice and more on counterinsurgency has harmed its more conventional capabilities. Like, while I would say those books were definitely written in the age of, because Colonel Oliver himself is a Canadian cavalryman in the sense, armored battalions, talks a lot about mechanized warfare. The thing with drones is that a drone in the military sense has, especially those cheap $1,500 drones have just become an ATGM that you can just guide into an enemy tank. You can maneuver it around and hit the weak spots. Even if it takes like 10 to 20 drones to take out a tank, that's still like around $30,000 you're spending to take out $1 million war machine. So there definitely the economics of warfare have afforded a certain paradigm when it comes to warfare in general. Because remember, when in Yom Kippur War, the Egyptians were exceptionally successful against Israeli armored formations with the use of ATGMs like the Malutka that were given to them by the Soviets. And it's the same here, because remember, Malutka is just a cheap ATGM, and it could take out not $1 million, but $100,000 tanks. So we were seeing this shift in the 80s, where we definitely were seeing the more prevalence of ATGMs, and drones have just become, like FPV drones have just become another part of this sort of shift in war, where big tanks, big formations, and even squads are becoming smaller and smaller due to the affordance of striking your enemy beyond the visual range, even on the ground. Aerial warfare had already gone beyond visual range in like the 90s, and now ground warfare is slowly also becoming beyond visual range, in the sense that the soldier need not need to even see the enemy. All he needs is a drone to see where your enemies are deployed. You know their position. You can surveil them. You can attack them using the drone itself or any other means you have, a mortar, grenade launcher, HMG, even your rifles if they're in effective range. So there's definitely a sense that warfare is changing. And a bigger problem with America is, from what I've heard, with the what Trump administration and Hegseth have called the masculization of the military, of DEI purchase
Oh
and all
God.
that, that definitely has caused a sense that in the end, professionalism will be set aside in favor of more aestheticism, in the sense that the aesthetic of masculinity becomes more important than actual capability on the field or actual ability to lead and plan operations, conduct operations. And I say this did hurt the American military organizationally a lot, because not denying promotions to people because of their race, denying that leads to bad morale among the troops themselves. That leads to a lot of issues, like
So
especially
I'm not
when
legally allowed to speak on behalf of the American military, but you know, a lot of this, I mean, a lot of this, the kind of newer stuff is really, really getting pushed on armed forces. It needs a bit of time to start trickling down actual kind of regular rank and file.
As a lot of the recent changes are very limited, and the military industrial complex is pretty reinforced against political happenstance, if you want to call it that. It's very limited in how
Oh,
much an
hey,
administration can change the overall structure of the military overall, especially as like a broad spectrum sort of U.S. military force. The technologies are still being worked on. The command structure is still in place, and for the most part, generals, admirals, they don't really care about what the flavor of the day is between presidents. So it
the
doesn't really have like
expectation.
huge impacts across the board.
So the expectation is that the military is going to work pretty much the exact same way, regardless of who is in office at the time. And the thing is, it is kind of an agenda setter decider problem, from my understanding, where a president is always a political leader, but generally, unless you're Dwight D. Eisenhower, which we don't have, you're not. They're not going to have the direct capability to actively make war plans and to design strategy and to actually run a military force. So that you have to entrust to the Joint Chiefs and to the combatant commanders and stuff like that. However,
Yeah, exactly.
and so it leads to this situation where you have a smaller selectorate and and an even smaller winning coalition, where it's not like you can just fire the people who are planning your wars and do it yourself. Even if you do fire them, which is what they did to General Brown, um, at the end of the day, you're still going to get people within that kind of military sphere who spent decades and decades under like 4 or 5 different presidents of both parties. Like, I mean, there's also the whole legal prerogative too. Like Pete Hegseth is a civilian leader and all. He's a political appointee, but in generally speaking, the United States military, and I would say actually has done a pretty good job of this, is that culturally it has to be nonpartisan. It has to uphold certain ethical obligations when it comes to government stuff. And so far, like there's a big mentality of like Dan Driscoll is a really good example of this. The Secretary of the Army right now, even though we have this dumbass Secretary of Defense guy in charge of the Defense Department, the Army Secretary, and I assume the Navy Secretary are still generally competent people who have been around for like decades. So like it's definitely a different dynamic, I guess. Sorry, I ramble a little bit.
No, that's fine. I mean,
oh, it's
Yeah,
fine.
and
We're here to ramble.
I find it super interesting
it's also
because
important.
I have a very different perspective on it from where I sit. I'm close to the DC Beltway, so the military for me is a lot of Pentagon people. And there's definitely, the challenge that I see is the people that have left either because they've been purged, they've been cleared out, or just because they said, okay, enough's enough. This is my time. I don't want to have to deal with this nonsense. At the flag officer level, the attrition that the military has suffered has been precisely the sort of people that have also been grappling with these questions of technological innovation and modernization and dealing with mass drone warfare. And so, it is a quirk of the system that the people who are the most politically progressive in their politics at the flag officer level also are the most progressive thinking about technology and the future of warfare and this thing that we're confronting. So unfortunately, when you purge one, you purge the other. And I think it's
you also
helped
have to
us
keep in
be
mind-
flat-footed in confronting the challenge that a lot of the people who are leaving are the same people who've been raising alarm bells about American dominance in future conflicts and saying, hey, we need to think differently about the way that we are structuring our military approaches, not just the way that we're embracing personnel within the force. And so I think it's been an unfortunate. I mean, I can't think of a military that's been strengthened by purges, so I don't want to overemphasize how important that link is, because I think just if you purge broadly, you are weakening yourself. But I do think that the targets that have been hit by these purges have been precisely the targets that help erode America's competence in the face of what I think you correctly identify as a changing military environment.
It's also really important to remember too, though, that the U.S. military, is in large part structured by Congress and the funding that Congress approves for these projects. So when you talk about purging generals or admirals, we're also at a historically high point for the number of generals and admirals we have. Like as a raw number, we have a lot more than at any other point in our history. And a lot of the projects that those people kind of brainstorm don't disappear when they go away, because a lot of funding is allocated to like Raytheon or the quote unquote like military industrial complex corporations. So a lot of the brainstorming for that like advanced technology isn't even technically happening in the military per se, if you know if that makes sense.
Did they get rid of the impoundments yet? Like, have they? If I'm not mistaken, has the Supreme Court ruled on like Trump's ability to like take money appropriated by Congress and use it for other crap?
I don't think there's
Because you're right, under most circumstances.
Yeah, I don't
But
think
Trump's
that's been
been-
specifically and directly addressed, at least not in the broad context that you're talking about. No, so there is still that approach that the administration, has shown a willingness to adopt of just we're going to do what we want to do.
Because you're absolutely right. Under normal circumstances, the federal agency is a creature of the legislature, including a military service. The legislature is supposed to write the legislation that creates it in the public body, defines its scope, its function, its purpose, its funding, its budget. The problem is that when the executive branch decides, well, actually, I think this money's better off changing the religious signatures on the dog tags or whatever.
Yeah,
I mean, the
I
courts are
definitely
supposed to
identify
stop
that. I think I'm thinking more so in terms of like our battleship that Trump wanted, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like everyone's worried about this battleship, but when you think about it in terms of congressional funding, not just for the battleship, but for the discovery period, the planning period, then we have to open the contract up to multiple offers. And by the time you get through all of that, you're looking at 10 plus years down the road. So this whole like idea of a battleship is just never going to pass muster. It's never going to happen. I doubt funding will even be allocated for it. So long term, a bad idea from one administration is not going to impact like technologically force levels, anything really.
Like the
Yeah.
combat ship?
Huh?
Like the littoral combat ship that they were working on 10 years ago?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all the railguns and shit on it?
LCS just had a purpose, right? And when the LCS program was kind of coming down the pipeline, we needed a littoral ship that was meant to address the escalating problem of piracy around Africa and the Middle East. And then by the time that program came to fruition, that problem was gone. And then we were left with this whole program that the problem that it was meant to solve, the problem wasn't there anymore. So then we had to try to figure out how to shift those assets to be useful for other things. And it just was never what it was designed for. It was a jack of all trades, master of none kind of program. And unfortunately, because of how these processes go long term, it has just ended up being a huge waste of money. So, and I mean it's kind of a good example though of like how long these sort of like funding spectrums end up being. So the concern, I feel like, that we're worried that one administration is going to have some kind of like lasting impact on like capacity or technology is definitely a concern, but I don't think historically it's grounded too much just based on how slow these kind of processes work in our government
Unless,
and
of
how it's
course,
kind of structured.
they skip the whole procurement process because Trump knows a guy,
Yeah,
like
I
they
was
did with
gonna
the
say
DC.
that he has a pool contractor he can call, so don't worry,
Yeah.
he'll just get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
that's
I
definitely
am
procured.
I'm actually appalled by the fact that the idea of a battleship in the modern day is even entertained. Like, imagine the radar cross section of that thing. That thing is just a massive, like, Christmas tree screaming at you, "Come, hit me!" And
It
you
makes
know
it
how
dick
naval
pump, though, obviously.
The only use case that I've ever really thought the battleship would be useful for was for railguns, because when we were testing those on destroyers, one of the big issues outside of like energy requirements for even firing the thing in the first place was the fact that it was basically tearing the ships in half every time it would fire over like long periods. So structurally, destroyers were not strong enough. Like the hull was literally not strong enough to like handle that energy. So my joke was always like, we should just put a nuclear reactor on a battleship and then use those for railguns. But
Yeah,
it
but
seems
could
like
we
my
add
joke was taken
the
seriously.
the railgun? Like, I do have some issues with the railgun project itself because, with considering how warfare is going beyond visual range, and ships, if you look at the ships of other navies, they've become smaller, they have become more compact. The threats that we'll have to face, a railgun will probably not even be required for that. I
Yeah,
do think
yeah. The problems are numerical, not how hard can we kill something. It's how many of this thing can we kill. And a railgun is a single target use kind of capacity when we need to solve, missile defense like questions. So yeah, 100% agree.
The battleship to me always made total sense as a proposal out of the Trump administration because it just seems like it's an idea that was cooked up like and I acknowledge that I'm saying this on a gaming stream, but like it's a very Hearts of Iron sort of like like Matt Painter
Yeah.
brained like we're gonna get the battleship tech, we're gonna do it. And or even even worse, like this stream is definitely not, by the way, sponsored by War Thunder, but like it's a very like War Thunder, like use my subscription code and unlock the Trump battleship
the
idea.
Trump battleship is guide the snail has claimed the Trump battleship. Like,
That's right. Yeah.
considering they have the Challenger 3 in there, even though the tank's not out yet, I am not surprised if someday they're like, you know what, we're adding the Trump battleship to War Thunder just for the fancy.
Right? So that to me
Yeah.
is like the perfect Trump administration Defense Department initiative. Like of course the Trump Navy is building this big useless battleship. It makes me miss
Yeah,
actually
and
policymakers, right? Like we're so accustomed to discussing, all of this stuff in the frame of reference of the people that you were mentioning, Nolan. That that there are professionals that are military professionals that have been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That good ideas survive bad administrations. That bad ideas die as soon as it's possible for competent people to kill them. and that we kind of move forward. And man, I just see that paradigm so shifted by this second Trump administration, that just seems to embrace the dumbest stuff with so much gusto and insistence. But yeah, I never
It's really
questioned why
been-
they were putting forward a battleship. That's the most Trump-brained thing I could possibly imagine them doing.
It's really become a bit of a. It's so hard to talk about like the U.S.'s role in the world and norms based on what is happening in this administration. Because like you look at something like the Iran war, the Straits of Hormuz. If we hadn't have just spent like a year exhausting the goodwill of some of our strongest military alliances, the Iran war probably would have gone so differently than it's been.
Yeah.
I will say
And
there is
another
a little bit of
thing-
precedent.
You go first, Nolan.
Oh, okay. There's a little bit of precedent for closing straits to military action because Turkey closed the Bosphorus to us when we invaded Iraq. All I was gonna say. Sorry.
So what I was gonna say is that, see, the thing is to win the Iran war, like, first of all, you need a proper military objective. What are you looking at? What do you want out of this? Whatever is it that you want out of this, it is clear that mere air power, mere naval power, that's not gonna do jack. You need to get boots on the ground. And the Trump administration knows this because they know if they get boots on the ground, if there is an invasion of Iran with like the army, the Marine Corps, all of them involved, it's gonna be political suicide. Like, it's just gonna pretty much.
Well, you come from a parliamentary system, right? So, in theory, at least, is that a prime minister has to at least go back to his people and say, "Hey, I want to do this. I have to consider: do I have the mandate to carry out this policy that I ran on?" In the United States, the president of the United States is basically pretty much a dictator over the executive branch for all 4 years of his administration until he leaves. Unless you can get 2/3 of the Senate to, or 3/5 of the Senate to remove him from office, like the mandate that you only need, like you don't, the president's ability to do stuff with the executive branch does not shift with his mandate like it would in a parliamentary system where if they piss off their own party enough, they'll get removed or something like that.
Yeah.
So like there has always been a fear. Like the 25th Amendment was written specifically to create a kind of Caine mutiny sort of situation where, like, if somebody's so freaking stupid that even their own cabinet says that they're a dumbass, then yeah. But the problem is, you know, and this has been the goal for the Republicans all along. You know, if you've ever heard of the concept of unitary executive theory, which
Yeah.
is kind of a whole thing that started with the Reagan administration, is this idea that the president of the United States
thing that he pushes.
Yeah. If even though these are congressional powers that are delegated to the executive branch, because the president supposedly has executive power, he can use those powers that are delegated however he wants. And so, and in practice, of course, since he's only accountable to voters once every 4 years, not actively to the legislature. And the only reason I say this is because there was a whole anecdote. It was somebody in the Trump administration who left, who was talking about how Trump was just absolutely baffled that Keir Starmer didn't go into the Iran war with him, because Starmer was like, "Hey, I got to talk to my people first. I have to go get support in Parliament and actually grow my mandate before I'm able to actually make a decision on this." Because he's like, Trump's just used to doing stuff, because there's straight up, if you're president of the United States, nobody's gonna freaking stop you, even if
Yeah, but
there'll be a government
you
shutdown.
know, after 4 years, the party and he will have to face the people. That's
No, he's a lame
what I was
duck.
really.
No, he won't.
Well, but
He ain't running again.
the Republican Party will have to face the people, and
Exactly.
He doesn't care.
And so Trump personally, I think, has an ego large enough that he doesn't care what happens to the Republican Party after he's gone.
And again, it kind of paints this whole picture that like talking about things right now is so difficult because, like, yes, the Republican Party is going to suffer politically for the things that are happening right now, but because there's sort of this like cult of personality, like he just doesn't care what happens to his party going forward, which has never been a thing before. Like normally you're sort of tied by your party and the pressure that your party puts on you, but what happens when you don't care about the pressure, right? That's sort of the question we're contending right now.
You also have to think about fake elections too, like the kind that are run in the deep south, where districts are so gerrymandered that there is just straight up no competition between different parties and different ideas in most of the red states now, especially after the last couple of years of the mid-decade redistricting. Well, because that ultimately, I think that rewards radicalism more than anything else in loyalty kind of politics rather than public accountability. Because if the because what that means is that because those districts are going to be a lock for a single party, no matter which way, no matter who wins that election, the only real competition is for the 30% of like hardcore voters that come in the primaries. So you get this situation where I genuinely think that there is a at least a 1/3 chance that the Republicans keep the House just because of what's been going on this year. Like I thought that it was going to be a lock, for the Dems, but they might keep it just because of the level of election rigging that they've been doing.
Yeah,
Huh.
I think you said about a one.
I'll count on democracy to save you.
Because a lot of even the Republican state legislatures have been rejecting. I should say a lot of them. Some of them have been rejecting even the gerrymandered like maps. Even though the Supreme Court has basically said like, yeah, sure, gerrymandering's fine as long as it's political and not racial. Which I mean,
Indiana did, and they all lost their seats for it in Indiana.
Yeah, but I mean, again, that's sort of like the situation we're in now, where half of the Republican Party, or maybe more than half, I don't know if you could pin like an exact percentage on it, but it seems like a lot of the Republican Party, politically, not like voters, like the actual representatives, they're sort of tied to this like death spiral where the leader of their party doesn't care what happens to them and is willing to throw away all goodwill, but they still have to get reelected. And they are getting reelected, but only the people who are tying themselves to the death spiral side. It's just this super unusual sort of circumstance, and it's really hard to make predictions based on like what is going to happen because there's zero sort of reason or logic behind anything that this Republican Party is tied to right now.
I don't know if Modi were to I don't know. Well, actually, no. Wait, didn't he? He actually did fucking do this, didn't he? I was about to say, if Modi started launching a bunch of airstrikes on Pakistan, would he keep power? And then I realized he already fucking did that.
See, the thing is, in India, that wasn't a war technically, so he didn't need the permission of the parliament or the president, because technically that wasn't a war, that was just airstrikes. So he could do that. That's a legal loophole in the Indian constitution. That.
To be fair, the United States technically hasn't been to war since 1945. So.
That's a weird.
We work the same loopholes.
Passed, authorized use of military force. It has gone through congressional checks and balances. Just because it isn't technically declared a war doesn't mean that like we haven't gone through the process.
That's
yeah,
the last time India was actually like declared a war technically was technically 1971, but de jure 1999.
Oh, like the Kargil War?
Yeah.
Actually, that kind of brings in another whole element to the drone thing you were talking about, because the drone kind of warfare that we see only really works assuming that the world's communication network stays up, that people still have access to cell phone towers and satellites and Starlink, which is what Russia has been just completely dependent on. So we shut it down for them. It just collapsed. And apparently, that's what allowed for these Ukrainian offenses to happen with Starlink.
Yeah,
but that really kind of reminds me of how the Kargil War ended, if you remember. Particularly, we just
Yeah.
said no GPS for you, and that was before India got its own satellite network service.
Yeah. Although the
Imagine
thing is,
if
when I study the Kargil War, I have deeply for a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
The West actually was much, much more helpful than the Indians would like to admit. Russia was actually not as helpful to India because they were themselves in the quagmire that was the Second Chechen War, and they could not help India in any way, shape, or form. So it was ironically the West that actually came up to India's help, especially with negotiating peace and getting those hills back. Especially the Clinton administration, there is a general idea among non-residential Indians, NRIs as we call them, because there's a general idea that the Republicans in general are more favorable to Indians, but when we look at history,
no.
it has always been the Democrats that have often been much more favorable to India than the Republicans. Because remember, one of the first presidents that actually, conducted diplomatic ties with India after, Eisenhower's support of Pakistan was Lyndon B. Johnson. And then Jimmy Carter literally came here with a TV set. We literally named a village after the guy. It's like quite close to my home. It's called Carterpuri. And they named a village after the guy. And even to this day, he's well respected here. So you don't hear the same stories about Reagan, and neither about Nixon. In fact, Nixon is actually infamous for calling her prime minister a bitch.
Oh, Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
He was right though.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's
kinda.
fighting. He was right. I mean, I know there can be fighting wars with some people.
We're here for the hot takes.
We're here for the hot. Indira Gandhi wasn't good for the nation at all. I will be very honest, because there were, however, I will admit the alternatives were similarly not very good. Like Desai, there's a lot of talk about Desai in Indian politics of him being a traitor to India and all that. But in my opinion, never put to malice what you can simply put to stupidity. Because here's the thing, right? My maternal grandfather, my mom's dad, he was very involved in the politics of the time. In fact, he was quite close to a prime minister who was prime minister for only 6 months. His name was Charan Singh. Same caste, clan as me, Karanveer Singh. He, in fact, comes from a village that's like quite close to where our ancestral village is. So, yeah, well known, close, all that. Fun fact: his grandson is actually the current state education minister. I'm forgetting the ministry he has, but he's a minister within the current coalition. Because here's the thing: Modi isn't in power right now out of the majority of his own party. He had to make coalitions with smaller parties, and he basically looked at the opposition. He looked at the parties that were, getting the short end of the stick with the alliance, and he basically went to them. He went we'll give you whatever you want. You just, fight the election on behalf of us, form government, come with us and form the government. And that was successful. He's still in power. And despite that, despite, being in a coalition, the coalition doesn't say jack shit to his policies, even when sometimes said policies are absolutely batshit insane. Like recently, he literally in a political speech told us to stop buying gold. Like, who the hell does that? In India, that's quite common for politicians to say when the rupee is weakening and the economy is kind of in the gutter. Even the previous governments did that. Indira Gandhi did that. Manmohan Singh did that. But when that happens, it's basically the sign that, yeah, shit is not good. And as soon as that happens, suddenly the Indian media, the political tone of politicians, stopped talking about the economy and started talking about, Hinduism, Hindutva, and how the Muslims are a threat, blah blah blah, infiltrators among us, etc., etc., and to stop talking about the economy altogether, despite the fact that the economy is right now in the gutter. No media debates, no nothing, just. And there are other scandals. There are major scandals going on against the education minister right now, because apparently a lot of high-profile exams, like, India has the same exam crunch system as Korea and Japan, where it's like,
China.
and
Like the
China.
gap out.
Yeah, exactly. So India has a similar system as that when it comes to its exam. There's the JEE that is for engineering students. I gave that exam. I got into a decent college. And then there's NEET for medical students. There's the IAT for if you want to go into pure sciences. I gave that exam and I got a position at ISFUDE, which I gave up for being an engineer. And so basically, these exams decide your life, like where you're gonna go. And apparently, the organization that does those exams, called the NTA, was leaking papers for huge sums of money. Like, the people who made those papers were literally leaking the questions on like Telegram channels, WhatsApp channels, all that stuff. And those leaks, apparently the guy responsible for them said that, there are more high profile people that are involved in this. And, for a system that has practically been selling the dreams of, hey, you were poor, give this exam, go into this government college because, education is state funded, state subsidized, so it's cheap. You don't have to pay up that much money. And, go to this college, you'll get a good job, your future is secure and all that. And now you have scandals in such exams where it's like the super rich are paying like how much in America? It's like $500,000 to buy answer sheets to these exams.
It's like the varsity blues scandal all over again.
Yeah. So they're practically just, buying those exam sheets and getting into these colleges. And there are statistical irregularities in cutoffs and all that stuff, ranks. And, I'm not supposed to say this in public, but I know people who, got really good scores in their competitive exams, but their technical skills and their general, like, academic performance leaves a lot more to be desired. Of course, could be a lot of issues, could be mental pressure, so a lot of shit happens. But considering that yeah, just I can't say much more than that because don't want to get myself in trouble, don't want to get anyone in trouble. I'm a kind man, so all I'm gonna say is I know people.
To pull your feet out of the fire then and keep you out of trouble, I'll bring us back to a sort of a generalized point, but it's not my point. I think Ann Applebaum and a lot of others have pointed it out pretty aggressively, but that pro-democracy movements around the world overwhelmingly are rooted in anti-corruption movements, right? Because as we see these democratic institutions erode, what replaces them are these corrupt systems, right? Where you can buy influence, you can leverage a position for power. We're seeing it in the United States where we're like, I mean, the very first thing Trump did when he was elected in 2024 was launch like a shit coin so that people had a way to funnel cash directly into his pocket around any kind of safeguards or controls that anybody has. Like it's the highlighting the corruption in these illiberal administrations is something that is a really important part of defending liberal values and restoring and expanding liberal values to systems where they've been eroded.
Hey, do you know what's going on with the cockroach party?
I'm sorry, say again?
The cockroach party is I went to their protest. They're nice people. They're just like disaffected students who are like angry with the government, with the system, all that. They're pretty much like, Peter Magyar and his guys, in the sense that
It's
they're
like
just an
populism.
anti-corruption movement. Yeah, it's like kind of populist, but also anti-corruption in general, which is good because India has a lot of corruption.
Yeah, the issue with dealing with corruption is that it's not an issue that you can simply legislate away. Especially, I mean, every country freaking has it. But what I will say is that if it gets endemic to a certain political system, um, then the problem isn't necessarily creating tough anti-corruption legislation and enforcing it. The issue is more getting is more how are you going to find people willing to trade away the very thing that makes up political power and leverage and transactions in that particular jurisdiction in order to actually get that stuff done and passed. Honestly, I almost compare it to the housing market in the sense that in order to actually lower housing prices, you're going to have to take something away from someone else. For example,
Yeah.
when it comes to the housing market in the U.S., you have to, in order for housing to get cheaper, the market has to crash, and with the market crash means people's investments go away. Same thing goes with corruption. I mean, if somebody is extremely used to selling votes and stuff like that, paying money, the level of graft that you usually see, then people are going to actively vote. People aren't going to actively vote against what's in their own self-interest. And in people's immediate, and ultimately, if you're involved in politics in any way, shape, or form in that sort of system, your immediate self-interest is preserving the kind of structure of the system. Like, how do you get cops to show up to work if they only make if they make pretty much minimum wage, and
Yeah,
they're already
cops
used
here
to the
are
system?
extremely poor. Like,
Yeah,
they do have a lot of social security, but they do not have actual income that they can spend on, say, luxuries.
and so
So
they supplement it.
so they supplement it with bribes, with
Well,
with
I think that's why systems, you know, there tend to be these big revolutionary style movements. Yeah, like you mentioned Peter Magyar, like even if it's not literally a revolution, right? There's this sense of this big anti-corruption movement that's going to sweep everything out and sweep something new in. Because it is so hard to just kind of incrementally evolve your way out of really entrenched corruption, really entrenched, like you said, incentive systems for people. So yeah, but it does happen, right? I mean, that is the goal.
yeah.
It does happen with some regularity across human history that we say, okay, enough is enough. Like we've got to build something better, and then we can succeed in doing that. I mean, maybe to your point about like the housing market, Nolan. Like I am a homeowner for lower housing prices. Which is like the ultimate unicorn in the
Yeah.
space, because I'm basically saying, all of that wealth that I've accumulated on paper, that doesn't mean much of anything, by the way, unless I want to go live in the middle of the wilderness. Because if I sell my house, I presumably am buying some housing in a similar market that I'm selling into. So it's wealth on paper. I can I could borrow against it. It's about the only thing I can do. Or I could sell and go live in the middle of Nebraska somewhere where housing is still cheap, I guess. But then I'm in the middle of Nebraska somewhere. But so I think there's a lot of this story that we tell in America, particularly this story we tell about home ownership being, a symbol of having achieved a portion of the American dream, of being a part of, an ownership society. And then we build this paper number that we can tell homeowners, look at how much more wealth you have that's all locked up in your home. Right, but look at you have it. Your home price doubled, man. Your equity there has doubled, and that is wealth that you have. Never mind how hard it is to ever actually access any of it. It's yours.
Yeah.
And if it goes away, you feel like you've lost something. To your point, like there's this huge loss. Never mind how tangible that loss actually is. You can put a number on it, and that number can look scary for people. I lost $200,000 because the value of my home disappeared. That's going to feel really bad to a lot of people.
I'm not saying that it's impossible to fix these problems. What I'm saying is that in order to fix them, you're going to have to do certain things that fundamentally makes the government less capable of acting. Like it actively damages the government's capacity, state's capacity to get rid of corruption. It's unfortunately, it's almost like almost counterproductive. It's almost counterintuitive in the sense that like because in order to get into a position of power where you can actually legislate that into place, you have to participate in a system that ultimately incentivizes and relies on corruption and also transactional relationships of power. Like to the cops example, it's not just that they're supplementing their income; it's that that's what keeps them loyal to the government. That's why they're cops. And governments need cops to actually enforce laws. But if there isn't anything at the end of the day, all political offices are offices of profit first and trust second. Even if that's not what people like, even if that's not what we like to say. We like to say you should never use your public office for personal gain. The thing about that is that, well, at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of personal gain that we consider to be authorized, and the personal gain that we consider to be unethical. The difference is whether or not it's under the government's control. So a public officer who makes 100% of their salary or 100% of their income from their salary from the government is ultimately more accountable because that way, if that salary ever gets turned off, their life is ruined. There's only one stream of income directly from the top down versus somebody who's in a public office who is engaging in graft, who may be taking, lobbying donations or bribes or engaging in double dipping and this sort of stuff. You have somebody building up their own power network, kind of going from the bottom up. But the thing is that that's kind of endemic to these political systems. You can't
Exactly.
if you remove your own power over these people by getting rid of corruption.
Another thing when it comes to corruption in India and how it's fundamentally different from, say, corruption in the United States is that Indian corruption is very systemic in the sense that it is something we unfortunately inherited from the British, along with, because to quote, I'm forgetting the name of the person who said, there was a person who once said that the only thing that has changed in this country is that our masters have turned from white to brown.
Damn.
After independence.
That goes pretty hard in the paint. I'm
So-
not gonna lie.
But yeah, the thing is, our government was very much, even our legal system now and then and in the British rule, is still very much based on the old colonial legal systems, which were not designed to run a state, but to exploit a people,
Right.
you know? So to get rid of this kind of corruption would it's difficult because it's very systemic, very in the system, and not only is it, I'm sorry, I'm scratching my it was itchy. It's not only difficult, but also what do you do? Like, let's just say something as simple as a traffic cop. That guy has been taking bribes from traffic violations to let them go without a ticket. Say you have to, change the system. You have to, fire that guy. You need to bring in a new guy. You have to make sure that the new guy doesn't take bribes. You have to make sure that while the transition takes place, the entire traffic system doesn't collapse on itself. Because you do need someone to provide that service in the meantime. That's just an example of a traffic cop. There could be a lot of examples of this place. Like, you do need institutions, but if you want to, if corruption becomes something that is systemic in those institutions, you need something to replace it. But to replace it, you need to destroy those institutions and set up parallel institutions at the same time. It's very difficult. The only place where I've seen this actually, properly succeed is Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew is
Oh
perhaps,
my
in my
God,
opinion,
man.
yeah, Lee Kuan Yew glazing is on
Well, his
par
whole
with.
thing is about paying freaking public servants enough to not have to take bribes, because that makes them dependent on the central government.
Exactly.
Well,
But
you're talking
considering
about
a
that,
country as,
I was just gonna say you're
I was
talking
gonna
about
say,
this in the context of the civil service, which is also true. But I mean, elected public officials face the same sort of math, right? I mean, there are no people who leave the U.S. Senate poor. And it's not the hundred and whatever $1,000 a year that they make as a senator.
Well,
That's the reason.
okay, so that's the nature of democratic politics. There is no way that you can have a democracy without having a system that fundamentally favors people who are, if they're not rich, then they're well connected. And here's the reason why. If you are in a state, for example, like Florida, with 27 million people in it, right? There is no possible way that the average person is going to have the capacity or capability to actually campaign to all those people and then actually be a good senator. By being a good member of a legislature, the expectation is you have to have a full-time staff in your district and in your and in the capital. In Florida, your district is the entire state, so it's several offices all over the state, even for the opposition candidates. Um, you are expected to constantly be doing research, to constantly be traveling between Washington D.C. and the state, and there is a direct relationship between the amount of money that it costs to maintain a campaign and actually stay in power. And at the end of the day, this is straight up power politics. It's no different than it would be in a dictatorship. It is a winning coalition finding a group of the smallest group of supporters necessary in order to become the winning coalition. And then if you lose those groups of people, those people can go to another winning coalition. So it's all about leverage. It's all about It's all about connections. And I'm not saying that in like a general sense. I'm saying that in a kind of in selectorate theory sense. There is not everybody's vote counts, but not everybody's vote counts equally. And you're never going to fix that. In my opinion, that is not a fixable thing in democracy. Like it either happens in an organized way or in a disorganized way.
Yeah, that's in terms of office seeking, but I think the point I was trying to make was like even if you manage to be relatively modest, and because there's a large popular campaign that rallies around you, or money people find you during the campaign, or whatever it is, somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was not particularly wealthy, entering office, right?
Well,
but
why do you
she's
think,
doing fine now. And then,
well, why do you
and I'm
think
not implying
senators?
that there's overt bribery or corruption there. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that where maybe the corrupt literally slide me money under the table to vote a certain way, or that's going to lead to a contract getting approved or something, that gets replaced by this informal system of still being able to rely on outside sources of wealth through speaking fees, through people who want to pay you to come to an event.
Lobbyists pay for access mainly. Like it's not direct bribery where they say, I'm going to give you money if you vote this specific way for me, because that is illegal. It's bribery. But what they do pay for is that I will become a part of your winning coalition you're going to rely on my support to take office and maintain power. In exchange, anytime I have a problem, I get to be the first one through the door. And then on top of that, they have that leverage because that is a person's loyalty. The loyalty goes both ways. They expect you to be loyal to them, but you have to try to maintain their loyalty to you and their constant flow of money. It's the same way the Romans were. The Romans' doctrine was meant to be a fountain of grace. And but the thing is though is that this can be useful in some ways. because why do you think almost every governor's, at least one candidate in any governor's race or Senate race is going to be a representative or a senator or somebody who has an existing campaign? The reason why is because they already have that not only that network of funding but also the infrastructure. They already have offices with staff members who are already experienced in running a campaign. They already have a policy record. They already have experience directly doing stuff. Like, so that all of that infrastructure that goes into like actually seeking and taking power in the United States, the district offices, the staff members, the infrastructure, it doesn't just disappear once you actually get in office. That is an organization that you have to constantly run and maintain the support of in order to do stuff or do it. Like the purpose of a campaign isn't to win one election, it's to continue to win elections in the future as an organization. I ramble a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I think my point bringing it up was more just along the lines of saying that these systems exist and create incentives, these systems of overt corruption, and that the more nuanced, if unsatisfying, suggestion is that where liberal democracies succeed, they succeed not in obliterating those incentives or somehow creating this system within which all of that is fully institutionalized into like a nominal salary, and therefore you somehow magically wave a wand and eliminate the principal agent problem and all of these other desires. It's that it channels overt corruption into more sanitized and palatable methods that still meet some of those purposes, but without as many direct, overt, arbitrary downsides.
I will say that in the end, when it comes to these systems, which in the end, it's a bit weird in the sense that they are, in the context of India, let's just say, do you know one of the reasons Modi is quite popular is because he has made this image of himself as a self-made man. He did not come from the politically connected families, from the elites, from because Indian politics is very dynastic. Rahul Gandhi, the current leader of the opposition, his dad Rajiv Gandhi was a prime minister. His mother Indira Gandhi was a prime minister. Indira Gandhi's dad Jawaharlal Nehru was a prime minister. So there's this dynastic trend in politics. Another example, Samajwadi Party, current leader Akhilesh Yadav, his dad Mulayam Singh Yadav, both are chief ministers. Then the example I put forward before, Charan Singh, his son Ajit Singh led his party when he passed away. They went to his funeral. They're a close family, basically. His son now, Jayant Singh, now he's, involved in politics. So the general trend of political parties in India is dynastic in the sense that the next member of the political party is the son, daughter, relative of the previous leader. What the BJP did is flip this narrative on its own head. Mm-hmm. While they do partake in dynastic politics, like Amit Shah, the home minister, his son Jai Shah, gets favorable treatment. He's the current head of the cricket administration or board of cricket counts, BCCI, whatever, and even has a chair in the International Cricket Council. And, Modi does not come from a political dynasty. He doesn't have much money. Like, I do think he is hiding his front somehow. There's no way that guy is slaying in those outfits and does not have the money for that. And there's no way that man does not have money. But the thing is, his actual finances that he publicly shows amount to a modest 400 million rupees, which sounds a lot, but that's also the net worth of like my entire family. So it's actually not that much. It's not going to get you like really far.
It's not inconceivable to a normal person.
Does he represent a district?
Modi?
Yeah.
I think Modi right now represents Varanasi, Banaras, which is like a very important holy city of Hindus. I'll have to get you back on that just a bit. Uh,
India is
uh,
a single member districts kind of jurisdiction, right? Like the Westminster system where there's no
yeah,
like at large, seats.
yeah, he is the member of parliament from the Varanasi district, which is a very like the thing is, Varanasi is basically a holy city for Hindus. It has a lot of important temples, a lot of important what we call dhams. So, and there's purpose to that. He wants to show himself as like a Hindu first leader because majoritarianism is a very strong trend in South Asian politics. Go to any country, Pakistan, majoritarianism has been around since the 70s, since the Zia-ul Haq's ascension to power. Bangladesh, after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's like government, there were a lot of populist governments who were not very amicable to the rights of minorities that live there. You look at Sri Lanka, they literally had a civil war over language rights, a civil war that was quite brutal, had a lot of people killed, and you know, it was hell on earth. India got involved and became India's Vietnam. Like, not many people talk about the Indian intervention in the Sri Lankan civil war, but basically it was a disaster. It was not very well planned. It was not well executed. Very much, you know, ah. And so majoritarianism is and even in Myanmar, like, the oppression, like, again, Rohingya Muslims and other minorities, it's basically a very South Asian politics is very much driven by a sense of majoritarianism. It is a miracle that India was able to stem off this majoritarianism until 2014. Because up until then, and I would say the start of this majoritarian form of politics in India took place in like 17 in the 80s with the Ram Mandir movement. And it really came close to head in the 90s with the demolition of the Babri Masjid. And after that, governments in Gujarat, all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but it generally did not represent itself in national politics until like 2014. When it went national, people went crazy. And your average BJP voter has nothing in he's basically the same as the average Republican voter. That's what I'm saying. Deep state, very heavily conservative Christian, but in India's case, it's Hindu, and very strong opinions on religious and ethnic minorities, which is very weird because technically everyone's a minority in India. Because you see, Hinduism is not a monolith. The BJP is trying to make it a monolith by calling it the Sanatana Dharma. But in reality, there are a lot of practices within Hinduism. I myself belong to a sect called the Arya Samaj. We're not, mainstream Hindus. Our practices are different. The way we practice our religion is different, and the BJP doesn't like us. But they do pay lip service to our faith, but in reality, they actually don't like us. They're not very conducive to our very. I don't know how to explain it, but in the sense that the thing is, I personally, in matters of faith, tend to worship the Vedic gods, that is Lord Indra, and Lord Surya, Goddess Saraswati. I tend to worship those gods. I tend to look at the Vedas as the source of Hinduism rather than the Upanishads and Puranas, which is what most trains of Hinduism, which in the end either worship forms of Shiva or forms of Vishnu, tend to worship. I don't belong to those strains because I do not think that is authentic Hinduism. The authenticity of Hinduism lies in the Vedas. Enough about my religious belief, but yeah. The thing is, Hinduism isn't a monolith, which is one of the reasons the BJP is unable to capture the South. They have tried, but the South stubbornly resists to not only their linguistic imperialism, but also their very, you know, North India centric interpretation of Hinduism.
Well, and
Like
I think that's you made the parallel to American Republican politics, and I think that's a suitable parallel. We just saw our own Defense Department reclassify or rework its list of religious classifications in this country that I think reduced 180 something religions to like a few
Pretty
dozen.
still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
less than fewer than
Eight.
And
three
they took
dozen.
they said that Mormons weren't Christian,
They
which
they
pissed off Mike Lee.
they notably
And
said
the
that
Illuminati slash
Mormons, yeah,
LDS Church went and pulled strings and made it go away.
yeah, they've since reversed course on that, but they did initially publish the list with Christian dash Protestant, Christian dash Catholic, Christian dash Evangelical, and then it was just Mormon.
Hold on, y'all, I'll be right back.
Without the Christian marker. So, that sense of like trying to police what sect is appropriate, like I think we see religious populists trying to do that here as well, where Trump's movement is very much dominated by white evangelical politics in this country, to the exclusion of I think other Christian traditions as well as other faiths.
I do think this has become a feature of right-wing politics all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like how what the BJP has, the interpretation of Hinduism that they have been promoting, the Sanatana Dharma, in many aspects is quite similar to evangelical Christianity. Like they have preachers who will spout the party line and nothing else. And most of them are criminals. I'm not even gonna joke on that.
That's parallel
Like
here too.
recently there was like it's uncannily similar.
Uh-huh.
It's because there is a story that one of the reasons we started, because before 1990 you cannot hoist the national flag without the permission of the government, because the national flag was considered a sacred like symbol. So to not disrespect it, only the government had the right to dictate who can use the national flag. You couldn't have just your national flag hang out of your house for no occasion. And if there was like the Republic Day or the Independence Day and you had to do a flag hosting, it has to be approved by the government, all that stuff. Or the government has to do it. There was this man by the name of Naveen Jindal who lived in the United States. And he saw Americans, because he lived in the deep south. He saw Americans, have the American flag outside of their houses. And he was like, why should we do that in India? So he went to court, and the court ruled that Indians have the right to use a flag as symbol. I said that's a good thing, because we can hoist the flag of our country whenever we want. Even though a lot of people do not know how to properly hoist the flag or the flag laws, I'd say that doesn't matter as long as the feeling of patriotism is there. So, and I do feel like, and do you know one of the most infamous preachers who spreads, Salafi jihadism, actually got a lot of his inspiration of how faithful people should be from the United States, from like deep South American Christians. So, in a way, a lot of like right-wing politics all over the world, not even in India, but also as we saw in Hungary for years, like George Soros conspiracy theory started in Hungary. That's what got
Orban.
That's what got him. That what got Viktor Orban in power.
Yep.
And the same narratives, right-wing narratives, got Putin in power. But Russian politics is a whole mess. We don't want
whole other
the
can of worms. Yeah.
Yeah, that is such an interesting can of worms. It is like I am appalled, studying the 1993 constitutional
Uh-huh.
crisis and the whole transition from Russia to the Soviet Union and the Chechen wars and how they affected Russian politics.
Yeah.
It's it's very it's like it's crazy and it's such a doozy, but it perfectly mirrors how politics is like came to be seen and like became a blueprint sort of for right wing politics
Mm-hmm.
everywhere.
It's an
I'd say this form of right wing politics started with like Hungary and like you know with Russia and all those countries, but I would say the international right wing has become very homogenized in the sense that it's the same shit, just with a different coat of paint. Evangelical, Sanatani, you know, it, it's just a different word, but in the end, what it truly represents is the same ideology, the same set of a sense of social conservatism, a sense of economic nationalism, a sense of austerity, autarky. It's and that Protestant work ethic, which is crazy because in India we don't really have like a very strict work ethic, but over time you know, we just took over the Protestant work ethic, and it's crazy. So yeah, I know I'm just rambling. It's
No.
like,
I mean, the
but
homogenization of the right, I think, is a really keen observation because, we talked about Russian politics. It's wild to see in America the same people who would have been like the staunchest anti-Russian Cold Warriors yeah, have transformed like within a political generation. I mean, some of these are literally the same living people, not just the same movement, have transformed into the biggest apologists for Russia. Russia can do no wrong, and it's because it
yeah,
sees Russia as part of this global right that it counts itself a part of. It's very strange to watch in real time, honestly.
exactly. It's something I noticed because as someone who is seeing the American political system, the Indian political studies political systems all
Mm-hmm.
over the world. I have family. I have lived myself in the United States. I have family that lives in the United States. So, and it's and the way they talk about politics, the way we look at political movements, it has become just so similar. It has become so homogenous over time. It's crazy. It's like it's the same shit different day. And no matter what country you go to, even in the UK or you go to like India has its own, immigration scare in the form of Rohingya and Bangladeshi Muslims, and which is crazy because I'll be honest, I have never seen a Rohingya Muslim in my life. I've never seen a Bengali Muslim in my life.
I don't
I
think
do
that
not know.
Bangladesh even has like terrorism at all among their Muslim population. Like I've never heard of a Bangladesh terrorist attack.
Like there's no terrorism. It's actually, let me tell you about Bangladesh politics a little bit. This is you're coming to
Didn't they just
my
execute their
place.
prime minister?
They have plans. They didn't because the prime minister is in hiding in India.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So the thing is, Bangladeshi politics for years is dominated by two families and two parties. There's the Awami League, and then there's the Bangladesh Nationalist Party (BNP). So the BNP is like the right wing. The Awami Party is like the left wing, sort of. But the Awami Party is its own can of worms. They were very repressive in the 2010s. They did bring a lot of economic progress, but at the same time, there was a lot of repression as well. Then, students disappearing, killed in protest, fired upon by the police. It came to a head in 2024. And basically, the only difference was that the army decided to not shoot at civilians this time. Decided to back the protesters, and more of a corruption scandals were revealed. A lot of stuff happened. It's a very complicated thing, but basically, in the end, uh, Sheikh Hasina, the prime minister of Bangladesh at the time, ran from the country. She's safe and sound. The country, declared her a traitor and brandished her, for death and all that. And there was a sense of alarm, and there were actually some murders of Hindus and other minorities in the country. But it wasn't like, some large scale state sponsored thing. It was just like a couple of lynching. Like that
It wasn't
stuff
like a
happens in
pogrom.
India as well. Yeah, more like a pogrom. That stuff happens in India as well. It happens a lot more commonly in India than it happens in Bangladesh. I'll be very honest with you. It's just that the media does not like to report it. The media does not like. Even the police refuse to take like reports. Whenever a Hindu kills, like whenever lynching and all that stuff happens, it's a lot of the times the police doesn't give a damn. However, when
So
a Muslim kills a Hindu for religious reasons, that happens as well. It's all over the media, all over the news. Recently, it happened quite close, and the police literally like launched an operation, rounded up some people, scare tactics, scare campaign, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there is this sense of majoritarianism is common in like South Asian politics. It's like everywhere. You go to Pakistan, instead of Hindus, it's the Muslims doing the same thing. You go to Bangladesh, it's the Muslims. You go to Sri Lanka, it's the Buddhists doing that to Hindus and Muslims. It's very and Christians. It's very like I will say India, Sri Lanka, in general are a bit more like Sri Lanka is bad, but in recent years they have softened up a lot compared to how bad it was like in earlier decades. India is yet to go over that softening period. India is actually getting more and more worse to the point where I see that a civil conflict or like some sort of political, like big political change, violent political change may happen, which will be bad for India.
like the Naxals.
Yeah, kind of like, if the BJP becomes more radical, there will be a lot more pogroms because they already carry out like what are called bulldozer. You must have heard of it, bulldozer politics. Where, and it's like, we're for criminals, we're just simply going to bulldoze their communities, we're going to bulldoze their, and by criminals, it's mostly Muslims or,
Like
lower
Duterte in
caste
the Philippines.
Yeah. It's very like, and, it's weird. It's very like, not only weird that how politics have pretty much become the same, like, us, especially when it comes to stuff like law enforcement. Like in the United States, how recently White House was literally posting pictures of criminals who were of certain races very regularly.
Like
Like,
Photoshop.
yeah.
Well, yeah,
There's a guy
And,
who they photoshopped a tattoo onto.
I
exactly.
I think that, I don't think the administration would be upset. Thank goodness we haven't really seen those sort of pogroms domestically, but I think it's
Huh.
I don't think
Huh, you
that
just
is
don't hear about them.
I don't think that is a fait accompli, right? I mean, if you look at Northern Ireland the past day or so, massive anti-immigrant violence in the streets. And immigrant in Northern Ireland is just code word for Muslim, right? So it's the
Yeah.
same sort of translation that, I have no doubt that Stephen Miller is continually disappointed that he has not stoked more of that domestically in the U.S. I think it turns out either I either American conservatives are more talk than action, or American politics actually really is just incrementally more decent. But we
Well,
have
the
not,
difference
thank God,
is
had the
that
widespread political violence. Which is why, by the way, the administration has to like suck people into ICE and put badges on them and ship them into some place like Minneapolis to do those acts of violence in a more structured way, because they don't have supporters just in the streets doing it.
well, the difference
Promised to
is
never
in the
shut
United
down
States.
entire.
Sorry, you guys go ahead.
Yeah, in the United States, I mean, we had the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and that's pretty much constitutional at this point. I mean, even if not like officially. Um, I mean, the United States nowadays builds a very strong part of it turned a lot of that stuff into at least an identitarian thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not, I mean, obviously historically this hasn't been the case, but ever since 1990s with the whole disability rights movement, later, general base effect entrenchment of the Civil Rights Act and other forms of pieces of legislation that pretty much create the expectation that the government is going to like root out kind of ethnic and forms of oppression. Because prior to 1964-ish in the United States, when the FBI actively went into police departments, and started getting consent decrees, and the judiciary actively came in and said, "No, local government, you can't act like this." Like the U.S. had sundown towns. Like I'm in Tallahassee, Florida, and literally like an hour away from Tallahassee. Well, I'm not in Tallahassee right now, obviously, because I'm employed, but in about an hour away from Tallahassee, there's a town called, or no, there was a town called crap, I forgot what it was called, but it was the site of a massacre in like 1930 something, where it was a majority black community that formed, and a group of convicts escaped, and a posse got rounded up by the local sheriff, went into the town, accusing the town of harboring the fugitives. The town said "fuck you" and actually shot at them, which led to a giant mob of people descending onto the town, basically murdering every single person who lived there, man, woman, child, and burning the place to the ground. Which, so now the town no longer exists. They only got compensation for that in 1995 after the Florida legislature passed a bill, basically, and they say reparations doesn't happen in the United States, which, Florida legislature did do reparations for that particular act. And there was also just the fact that, like, if you were, I mean, my girlfriend's parents, grew up in freaking deep South Thomasville, Georgia, where they had to have a shotgun in their car like 24/7 because they would straight up kill you if you were the wrong race in the wrong part of town. So, but I don't know. I'm not, really. I'm really interested in hearing about like Indian and just other political systems in general. It's like I feel like when foreign media has stuff marketed to Americans, it's always like foreign takes on American politics. But I reckon that India doesn't have like the same level of like civil rights movement stuff, right? Where there was like a big social movement to it.
We did have that. It's just not relevant anymore. We did have the anti-caste movement during our independence era, where casteism was in general seen as an evil, a social evil. But that movement kind of started dying down in the 70s, and right now there are even plans to like roll back on a lot of protections and rights that the lower castes have. Like,
Is that
in
because
India,
a lot of like the physical separations from like the Muslim groups in India, like literally breaking away and forming their own countries, or is it sort of a different thing now?
it's different. Like, see, when it comes to like that kind of thing, Muslim nationalism, the thing is, a lot of the people who believe that, there should be a state of Muslims, they went to Pakistan, all right? The Muslims in India that stayed here because they did not believe in such a political solution. Like, there should be a state for Muslims. In India, Muslim politics mostly are big. They have become earlier. They weren't a big issue because in the end, everyone, nobody paid attention. But as soon as the Ram Mandir movement happened, the Hindu right started gaining momentum, the politics changed from, there are clear injustices in the Indian system. The Muslims are obviously not as well off as, Hindus. And it's not even Muslims that are marginalized here. There's also people of lower castes who are like, they're not only economically marginalized, but socially marginalized as well. And God forbid if you're a Muslim of a lower caste, not only do you have the social disadvantage of being a lower caste, but you're also a Muslim. So, double disadvantage. And Lord help you if you're a woman or like transgender. That's even worse. So,
How do they even pick who's in what caste exactly? How can you even tell?
from your name, like the last name.
Oh,
That's why, like Karanveer Singh. Singh itself has connotation that I'm either Sikh or I come from the Rajput community or from the Jat community. It's not until people hear my like actual surname, which I don't use because I like
Is it
to
hard to-
remain vague.
is it hard to get a legal name change from a court?
Not very
that like a
hard.
thing?
It's not. You don't need to even go to a court. You just need to file a gazette in your local newspaper. It's stupidly easy. Like
But if you're a
it's so
criminal?
easy. The gazette has to be signed by a lawyer, so you
Oh.
can do that if you're. So, but yeah, a practitioner of law can easily sign you a gazette, and get a magistrate to accept that gazette, and you're good then. Actually, the thing
Wow.
is, a friend of mine is transgender, and with the recent change in laws, she had problems getting her ID and name change because they need to be approved by a medical group, and she did have medical approval. She did have a diagnosis. She had all the required documents and everything, but she was at the mercy of whoever's gonna do that, and she didn't want to be in that situation. Apparently, in the revised laws, there's a loophole that it does not take. Any Indians who are listening to this right now, close your ears. Don't tell this to the government. Apparently, it does not make gazetted changes illegal. You can, through a gazette, still change your gender and name. It's very like a loophole-ish way of doing this, but you can do that. So it's not like, for transgender people with the, the recent revision in transgender laws, it's like, over kind of like, it's gone back. There are still ways to, get your hand. Obviously, that's most. And here's the thing, right? India has a better track record on transgender laws than, same-sex marriage, and that's mostly because culturally we are we're not that much against transgenderism. We haven't killed them for anything. We haven't, persecuted them. We don't do that. In fact, in a lot of sects of Hinduism, transgender people are considered holy because they are said to contain the essence of not only both of the essence of Lord Shiva. That is his masculine form Shiva and his feminine form Shakti. So, they're revered in a sense. So that's one of the reasons the kind of Hinduism that BJP pushes is very antithetical to a lot of traditional forms of Hinduism people have been following for ages, because this kind of thing is not seen as good in the BJP form of Hinduism. Like the kind of Hinduism they want Indians to follow and go through, which is crazy because that's not our culture. In fact, let me tell you something. You didn't get this from me, but apparently Hinduism is one of the very few religions which actually does not have anything in its religious text against homosexuality. In fact, if you go to the Kama Sutra, which is a religious text regarding things of sexual nature, they do recommend positions for homosexuality. So
Oh my
we don't
God.
even have anything against homosexuality. We do not have anything against like transgenderism, cultural. The very like anti homosexuality thing in our cultures was very much a British thing because the British banned sodomy in their legal laws. We did not actually disallow sodomy until 2016. It was after a Supreme Court judgment struck down the law. And as for, same-sex marriage, the Supreme Court is like, we're not going to do anything. We'll defer to the central government for this, and the central government hasn't done anything for that. So, and it doesn't intend to do anything on that. In fact, the central government wants to bring back the anti-sodomy law again. There are a lot of like politicians and even a lot of people from rural areas who are in support of bringing back that law. So, however, the thing is, there is a there's a significant amount of Indian liberals who support Modi because for them, Modi is someone who brings prosperity, economic growth, no matter how fake that economic growth is, and a sense of stability, a sense of ease of doing business and all that. And to
Right.
keep them happy, he has to stay socially liberal because if he goes beyond a certain point, he will lose those votes in urban centers, which are important. Because, in India, we generally have a sense of like, we should improve society. We are the Congress government, the Congress party is at its very core a party that has always stood for more progressive values. And they have been in power for like a long time. But those values get entrenched in the population. So even when there's like anti-Muslim rhetoric, it's usually generally embroiled in this sense of like, they're backward and a very paternalistic sort of outlook, sorry, not outcome, in that, we should improve the social situation of women in Muslim communities. We should improve the social situation of lower caste Muslims in Muslim communities. And I don't disagree with that because there are problems in both Muslim and Hindu social structures that need to be addressed. But the thing is, the Muslims are not the majority in this nation. They are the Hindus that are in the majority. So, in the end, by focusing on the social issues of minorities, you are, in the end, ignoring the social issues that exist within the majority. And if you even dare bring out those social issues among the majority, you get branded like, a Muslim lover or whatever the word is.
Oh my.
There's like that thin veneer, right? Like it's what you're describing is sort of, I don't know, this, I guess what in online spaces we'd think of as concern trolling, right? This idea of like, oh, I really care about these values, but in the end, I'm only interested in pursuing them where it's going to hurt, people against whom I'm biased.
Oh God.
Exactly.
Imagine anti-sodomy laws coming back. That would make politics so freaking toxic because people would start accusing their opponents of being gay and weaponizing stuff. Like, what don't ask, don't tell existed in the military explicitly for that.
I'm sorry, Nolan, but like, would start? I mean, have you seen the Tallarico stuff? Stephen Miller calling Tallarico the first trans candidate, and we all know what he's implying when he lies about his veganism and all this other stuff. And it's like, I don't think it takes. I think the right in America is already
actually
I can't control. Come back. Yeah.
I can't concern troll about this because I called a writer from the Atlantic a homosexual woman once. So.
Would you say, purely a question, would you say some of that pushback towards like the caste of where Muslims kind of land in that system is in part due to like the tensions between Pakistan and India? Like, do you think that sort of feeds that sort of negativity?
Yeah, it does. It actually does. I will say
You just
because,
noticed my haircut?
What's that?
it's like haircut. I think Nolan is sarcastic. But actually, Nolan and I have a similar haircut right now because I had to get bald for some medical thing. Otherwise, I used to have a lot of hair. Uh, I even had a beard, and people were obviously making comparisons to Zohan Mamdani. Like, see, the thing is, I actually know his mom very well because she was a very famous movie director and well-connected family. So obviously, they were not that well, but enough. And she was a really good movie director, like award-winning movies were at Cannes. And in my opinion, she is one of the finest modern movie directors in India. She's pretty good at her job, and a lot of Indians hate her because she married a Muslim. That was Mamdani's dad. Because Mia Nair is a Hindu, and she also comes from the Nair community, which is like a disadvantaged community in Kerala compared to the Nambuthiris, who are the more dominant community in Kerala. So there's that. But the thing is, right, Kerala is very unique in India. And it's one of the reasons BJP is extremely frustrated they're not able to make gains in Kerala. Because Kerala is the perfect example of Indian religious harmony. Neither Hinduism nor Islam nor Christianity have a majority in Kerala. It's like a perfectly one-third, one-third, one-third population distribution. And well, the general trend is that the Muslim population tends to go with the Congress. However, that is also very fluctuating. That's not even a blanket statement because in general, community politics is a big thing. But and this is the invisible part of like Indian political discourse. Like Indian politics is very much decided by vote banks of communities, not individual rational people voting for a candidate. It's very much, oh, this candidate belongs to my caste, I'll vote for him. Oh, this candidate is a relative, I'll vote for him. Oh, this candidate is, he represents these particular interests of mine that are very rooted in community, in caste, I'll vote for him. So, yeah. So as I was saying, Kerala is like basically in the recent election the Muslims went with, and it's not even perfect because anybody votes for anyone. Caste politics doesn't play as much of a factor. Religious politics doesn't play as much of a factor in Kerala. But the general assumed trend is because in India the voting is through secret ballots. Nobody knows who votes for who, maybe except the election commission nowadays. Who knows? But so the basically is the actual perfect liberal political system in the sense that their people are voting for interests and not for,
Not the strict
a particular
partisanship.
caste.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the most craziest part that all of this was possible because of the Communist Party of India Marxists. They were the ones who fostered this sense of religious harmony and liberal democracy, which is crazy. Like a communist party actually pushing for liberal democratic values. What the hell?
Well, say more about that history for someone who doesn't know it.
So apparently, the thing about the Communist Party of India Marxist is that they broke away with the Naxal body movement taken, that is radical communists who decide to take up arms against the feudalism of the rural Indian villages. India was, and to a large part in the rural sector, still is a feudal country where, some people are practically living in serfdom-like conditions. And even in some places, slavery-like conditions. And so basically, the Communist Party of India Marxists, when it came to power in Kerala in like the 50s and 60s, they decided they need to, change the system. And what they did was basically nothing short of amazing. For one, they improved the education system significantly. All religious schools, Hindu and madrasas that are Muslim religious teaching schools, and Christian convent schools, all of them were brought under the purview of the government. All of them had to teach the government mandated syllabus. All of them have to teach the same things. In northern India, a convent school carries the connotation that there will be Christian prayer. The syllabus will be based on the Indian Council of Secondary Education, which is very much dominated by Christians, and a very like British style education. I've been to an ICSE school once, so yeah, I know. And I even remember the prayer, like "O Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread." I remember that stuff.
It's an interesting question, actually, because that's something that we struggle with in the United States quite a bit, is sort of our education system. Because of the nature of our structure, we have the states, which technically control education, and then we have the Department of Education at the federal level that sort of oversees equality, I guess. It just makes sure that the states aren't discriminating against people. And there's always this question kind of sitting in the background, like, what if the national government dictated like what needed to be taught, sort of like a standardized syllabus? Is that kind of what happened in India, where like the federal government decided?
The Indian education system is weird in the sense that there are three kinds of schools. There are government mandated schools, which are like run by the government. The central government, those are the Kendriya Vidyalayas, the Sarvodaya Vidyalayas, and the Narvodaya Vidyalayas. They're like, I will say, for the buck, they're the best schools you can get in India, and the best kind of education you can get on a budget, depending on the city and the conditions, of course, but it's like pretty good. Then there's state schools, which follow the state boards of education. In India, the system is very much, there is a National Council of Educational Research and Training, which in the end overlooks the Central Board of Secondary Education, which is the government mandated board. However, it is not the only board in India. There are other education boards. There are state education boards, which run state schools. There are other, religious board, like I said, Indian Council of Secondary Education, and the ICSE board, which takes care of certain schools. And there are also private schools which choose which board they wish to teach. They can teach an international curriculum. Like there are a lot of schools in India which have an international curriculum, and they can, teach whatever board they desire, ICSE, CBSE, although most schools in India follow the CBSE model. So what happened in Kerala was that the state school, because at that time, education wasn't centralized and it was very much left up to the states. Kerala basically took education as one of its priorities and focused on taking control of the curriculum and teach these values of equality, liberty, progress, etc. through its education system, turned religious schools into actual secular teaching places, because religious schools were very well entrenched in the state at that time. So, and the other thing they did was modernize a lot of their administrative structures, and proper investments into infrastructure, into trade, into healthcare, basically by ensuring that the people get proper facilities, that the people get proper care, that the people get the best education, the best healthcare, the best social services, social security. Basically ensured a society where anyone is free to pursue any goal that they wished. Because here's the thing, even despite being communist, they could not dictate a lot of like stuff because a lot of that was up to the central government. But with the resources they had, they practically created a state which is still one of the best states to live in India in terms of like the quality of life. And the GDP per capita is also like really good. It's like similar to Ukraine. And if you compare it by purchasing power parity, it's like very close to Oklahoma. Which isn't saying much, I would say, but at the same time, India's general GDP per capita is really bad. So it's like really fucking bad. So if you have a state where the living standards are the equivalent of like Stillwater,
Right.
that's a huge win. And I've lived in Stillwater, it's a nice place.
It strikes me as not just coincidental, though, that the sort of pluralism may not be the right term, but the much more functional, social and political interactions there correlate to higher standard of living and better outcomes. I mean, that reflects international comparisons too, right?
Right. And even in other states in India which have like really good standards of living, good standards of education and stuff, they tend to not have like basically their social structures are as such where a particular community does not dominate politics. Where it's not like, the Hindus are the deciding factor in who's going to be in the government. The Muslims are the deciding factor. The Christians are the deciding factor. So in the end, it's all about a pluralism born out of practical considerations of compromise and, concessions made by one community to another to keep their power. And it's very like, it's not like, I cannot put it in comparison with a Western nation because there is no comparison there.
Yeah.
But it's very much, if I would have to pick an Asian nation, Thailand like, or Vietnam would be a much preferable because a lot of Indian politics are rooted in left-wing politics. So yeah.
But yes, the counter example is easy to find in the Western experience, and I keep going back to how many of our, we've got a midterm election here in the United States this year, and how many of those districts are just deeply not competitive, right? Where one party's internal primary election really determines who's going to represent that area, because the general election just is so skewed as to be not worth running, right? I mean, like, it's just,
Yeah, exactly.
one party is just clearly going to dominate, and you can color in so much of the map, like right now, for our elections, without even, without people going to the polls and voting them. So what does that say about the functionality of a system that the election itself has become kind of an afterthought, and that voting is largely meaningless by the time you get to the general election, because these communities are so homogenized politically that the outcome is a foregone conclusion?
Exactly. It breeds a very, I will term it a politically conservative society in the sense that when it comes to politics, the political inclinations of the people do not change with, change in material, social, economic conditions. Like, and it's funny because India very much has become similar to the US when it comes to, because entire states are won by the BJP. Like, entire states, all orange. Which is crazy. Like the state of Gujarat. Let me check. Since when does the BJP have a government in the state of Gujarat? But that is where the entire, their entire politics came from.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even hard to find American examples of states where a single party controls not just both Senate seats, but all the congressional seats within a state, even in larger states. That's not unprecedented that all of those seats would be there. It's interesting too, because there is this moment, when we started to see Democrats in the United States push back against redistricting and the sort of Republican gerrymandering. We saw this brief moment where it was a feature of right-wing politics to decry how unfair it was that there were these whole areas where there wasn't a single elected Republican in federal office. And the easy answer to that is like, well, great. I'm so glad that you conservative Republican, are coming out so fervently in favor of a more proportional system. Let's engage in actual electoral reform to make it happen. But of course, then that evaporated very quickly once it shifted back to Republicans wanting to draw boundary lines that they wanted. That disappeared almost immediately, and it was no longer a question of fairness.
I checked, the BJP has been in power in Gujarat since 1990.
Since 1990, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite the stranglehold.
I was really hoping, I mean, still am hoping, that this sort of gerrymandering battle is sort of the final pin that is pulled that just makes both parties sort of throw their hands up and say, all right, let's end this. Let's just pass legislation and end this whole process. Unfortunately, because of the Supreme Court decision that basically green flagged all of the Republican efforts, I don't think it's going to get bad enough. So my dream was kind of killed by SCOTUS on that one.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I just don't think that. Yeah, I don't think Republicans are upset anymore. They were only temporarily upset when it looked like they might have some stuff go against them. But with that not happening, they're not that upset anymore.
I think they would have had to have had efforts, and the Democrats would have had to let go through. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna I always wonder why the American system of, appointing Supreme Court judges is like that, because in India, the judiciary is completely independent of the legislation, in at least in practice, you can bribe judges, you can do that kind of stuff, obviously. But we have the British system where there's a very clear separation between the legislation and the judiciary. Political parties cannot appoint judges. Judges are to be appointed by a judiciary council, which itself is independent from any interference from political parties and all that stuff. Which is, well, I don't know why the United States does not have a system like this, because I will say that will significantly improve a lot of the current issues we have, where it's the conservative majority among the Supreme Court justices, in the end harm the American nation altogether, which is very crazy, because we Indians do not have this problem because of the fact that our judiciary is completely independent from, political interference.
I think
So this is actually.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, you take it.
I was just going to say, in the policy side, even of this Discord, it's one of the questions that we're weighing. And it's something that I have thought about a decent amount, enough to the point where I kind of have I don't know if you want to call it a fix or a replacement, but essentially the idea that I sort of came up with, and I don't know if anybody else has had this idea. I'm not taking sole credit. I just thought of this, so if somebody else thought of this before me, feel free to credit them instead. But my concept is that we essentially, in the US, I think we could take the power to appoint Supreme Court judges away from the executive. I think tying appointment of Supreme Court judges to the circuit courts would be a better solution, because there's 13 circuit courts. So they would maintain the odd voting sort of tiebreaker capacity. And then basically my theory is that the Supreme Court or the circuit courts just elect one of their members for a term, a period of and then that's the Supreme Court. So the executive
Yeah,
still appoints federal judges generally, and the Congress could still confirm those judges, but the Supreme Court itself becomes like separated from the sort of political process.
Yeah, I mean,
That's sort of like my concept.
I think that's an interesting proposed solution. I think just the question of why the US has this problem is that we we might be a very 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 young country in the scheme of things, but we are a very 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 old liberal democracy. We sort of did modern liberal democracy first. We've been doing it for 250 years this year, and we haven't changed the technology we do it with very much. We haven't, like, the, and I use technology very very broadly to mean like the social tools and institutional frameworks that we use. We haven't changed it. We're running modern elections on, an 18th century framework, and so so a lot of our system.
And every liberal democracy that came after us has kind of had the benefit of a lessons learned sheet from all the other liberal democracies that
Right.
formed.
Right,
They can look at us, France, you know.
and I don't think our founders, as I'm reflecting back on this important anniversary for America, there's a lot of people are talking about the founding fathers. Though Americans, we talk about our founding fathers all the time anyway, so it's a barely an
Indians talk
excuse.
about Gandhis all the time.
There you go.
Indians talk about Gandhi all the
But
time.
I think our founding fathers would not have expected the sort of cult around America's founding and around them as figures that has developed. And so it seemed pretty clear that they established this framework where we can adjust the Constitution and change major sections of it and figure out what's not working and get in there and fix it. Our Constitution itself was a do-over attempt, right? It was a second try. We originally operated under
Yeah.
Articles of Confederation that were not getting the job done. So they sort of recognized the idea of like, okay, well, this is the system we'll put in place. I think they would be as surprised as anybody that large sections of that system are still operating unaltered 250 years later.
I will be
Yeah,
honest, the founding fathers will probably be surprised at the existence of Andrew Jackson.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, I think I don't think it would have taken long for a bunch of very opinionated guys to have strong opinions about the direction things were going.
Well, that's even like the example of the Electoral College, right? Because like the original sort of vision for the Electoral College, as per sort of the working theory of how it was supposed to function in the framers' mind, was this sort of like independent body in a lot of sense,
Right.
where like the people who were chosen as electors were supposed to like exercise their good judgment and not just like be picked by parties to sort of elect whoever they were told to elect, right? Like they were supposed to be
Yeah.
sort of another check on the system of the presidential election. But now today it's just, the Democrats win a majority of votes and then they pick electors and then those electors vote for the candidate that the Democrats want, right? Or vice versa for Republicans. So even that system is like a really good example of like the intention versus like the reality of what happened.
It would be very interesting to have like this alternate history scenario where the Americans like went with a parliamentarian system rather than going with the electoral college. The first past the post Westminster system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was certainly a possibility, right? I mean, we're one of the few colonial nations of the British Empire that didn't do that.
Yeah.
And so I do think that was certainly something that could have happened. A project that I started a while ago and then kind of abandoned, like so many projects. But that was kind of interesting, maybe worth picking up. But at one point, I sat down and decided I'm going to look at every American election from the election of George Washington. I'm going to look at every American election and figure out how I would have voted. Uh,
I
and
I have done that, and I have like, you know what, we can do like a presidential tier list
uh-huh.
of sorts. Like, I'll vote for him, maybe I'll vote you, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
someday on Project Liberal will be crazy.
But what I immediately realized in doing this, starting at the beginning, of course, with the first election of George Washington, is I would not have voted for George Washington. That's the wrong answer, because nobody cast a ballot for George Washington. They cast
Yeah.
ballots in specific elector districts for their specific electors. So going back to how the
Yeah.
Electoral College was imagined to have worked, like I would have gotten on a horse and ridden to the next county over, where I would have met at the town square out front of the local city hall building or some other building. Two or three guys would have been there who had, were sort of coyly seeking the opportunity to go serve on the electoral college as the elector from that electoral district. And I would have had to stick my hand in the air, no secret ballot, put my hand in the air for one of them so that I could be physically counted. And then we would decide, okay, that guy gets to go and sit with the electoral college. And then he's the only guy that actually gets to vote for Washington. And though that
Yeah.
framework still exists as a technicality within our system, the idea that first of all, there wouldn't have been a ballot at all. So there is no name whose name
Yeah.
is on the ballot. That there wasn't a ballot, and B, if there was one, the name on it certainly wouldn't have been George Washington. It would have been some guy none of us have ever heard of, who was beating some other
It's
guy none of us had
crazy.
ever heard of. Yeah.
It's kind
It's
of this
crazy.
principle that I've been working on, where I think, in my mind, I think it would be fair to sort of, in an effort to sort of break down this aversion that we have to pass like constitutional amendments. I think in order to assist that, it would be nice if we could just pass amendments, because ultimately what decides that an amendment becomes an amendment? It's the ratification by the states, right? Congress is just the first step in that process. So I feel like it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for Congress to like propose amendments, pass them, and then, just kind of wait and see if the states decide that it's a good fix, a good change, it works, put a 10-year time frame on it. If this amendment is not passed by 10 years from the date of passage in Congress, then it fizzles and it goes away.
Yeah,
I feel like
that's
that
how
was
you
sort of the intention.
that's definitely how you prevent the like eternal amendment process. There have been a few times in our history where Congress has not put that expiration date on it, so it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it doesn't quite have enough votes, but at any given time it could get them, even if it sits around for 100 years. That seems like a bug, not a feature. So yeah, I agree. No, but I agree with you there.
Because like you said, like we all kind of know, is that the framers never intended for the Constitution to be the end all be all, this sort of mythical document that stood the test of time forever. Like the amendment process was in the original Constitution. It's not like Madison and everyone added it 10 years after or 20 years after. Like it was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't use it more
Yeah.
often is a shame.
I agree with you there. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me on stream. I think I am gonna bop off here. Those who were watching the game know that I have successfully Peglined. I died to the extra boss, but we successfully cleared the difficulty level. So huzzah! And then I think we solved a few of the world's problems. I hope, or if we didn't solve them, we at least talked about them. So that's good. Thank you so much.
But still, talking about it is good, because if we talk about it, the first step of problem solving is knowing what the problem is, and for that you need to talk about it. So it was my first time on stream, because I just caught you right there. It was almost bedtime. Like I'm literally on my bed about to sleep in my shorties, and I was like, you know what, let's come on stream and talk.
I love the modern world. I'm about to go get a late lunch. You have an excellent night. Thank you for popping on stream. I really enjoyed it. And
Yeah,
anybody who's
thank you
out,
so much for the good time.
yeah, thank you. Anyone who's watching on any of the other platforms, if you want to know how you can be a part of the Project Liberal community, join our Discord. That's how you get the opportunity to volunteer and do other great things, and maybe pop on a future stream, like some of the volunteers that we had here today. So, thank you everyone out there for watching. I plan to do this reasonably regularly, so hopefully we'll see you next week, and have a good one. Thanks. Bye.